Welcome back to a new season of School on a Mission. My name is Andrew McPeak, and with me, as always, is the wise, the winsome, the wonderful, and a little wild Gina Watts.
Best intro ever.
She didn't know I was going to do that.
It was awesome.
So, folks, if you believe that school should be more than just essays and GPAs, if you believe that EQs are just as important as IQs, and if you expect amazing things from the next generation, then you're in the right place because we believe that too. And we are back for season 3 of School on a Mission. Today, we're kicking off by talking about something that every educator and leader needs to revisit from time to time, which is your why, what drives you, what gets you up in the morning, and how do you stay connected to your purpose when the work gets heavy?
That's right, Andrew. And to get us thinking about our why, we're going to start off with the question of the day. Okay? So what's something that reignites your sense of purpose when you feel worn down or disconnected from your why?
This is good.
Yeah.
For me, that sense of why always comes back to who am I doing this for? And so when I think about kind of reconnecting to the why, it's almost always about human beings.
Yeah.
If not always about human beings. So I try and find ways to quote unquote see the end user of what I'm doing. I've always been a little bit jealous of teachers in classrooms because they have the ability to see their end user every single day, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in one of those positions, maybe you're a school admin or you're like me, you're working in kind of education adjacent organizations, you don't get that benefit all the time. So I watch videos, I'll read quotes from past interviews I did with students or staff. I'll spend time with a teacher I know and just kind of reconnect. But if all those things are not available, I literally do this. I will sit and imagine previous conversations and think, what would an educator be dealing with? What would an educator be asking? You know, those kinds of things. Or what would a student be challenged with? What would a student be asking? And it's one of my strategies for kind of removing nerves before I speak as well, is to go, what if this is not about me? It's about them, and it is. And if I can imagine what they might be thinking or what challenge they might be facing or what question they might be asking and sort of orient myself around that, it helps me kind of rediscover or reconnect with that idea of why I'm here.
That's great. And it's so needed. I feel like embedded with your response is some practical ways for all of us to start to think about our whys. You know, for me, I think it's probably a couple things that help me get reconnected or reignite my passion or my why. But oftentimes, I think it's answering the question, what was I thinking? Who was I? What was I doing when I first said yes?
Yeah.
So if I can put myself back to, you know, because oftentimes, friends, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, when I am excited about something or I say yes to something, like it's usually in that like honeymoon phase, that beginning phase, and you're like, yes,
everything's great.
This is great. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it forever. Right. and then you're like, you get into it 6th, 7th year, and you're like, do I still feel
Can
that
I go
way?
home early?
Right.
Or,
Right. And so I think for me, it's that's probably like the key thing is reminding myself who, and that doesn't mean we don't evolve or we don't change or that our minds don't change, our experiences change, but I think that's what helps me.
Yeah. It's a recognition that it's easy to get distance from the original driver.
Yeah.
I often call that interviewing your 20-something self. Like if you were in the room when you made that decision, you could ask that person some questions. What would they say? You know? I love that.
That's great. Well, you know, it's helpful to remember that revisiting purpose can shift everything, you know, our energy, our outlook, even how we approach the day ahead. And today, friends, as we kick off season 3 of School on a Mission podcast, we have our very own Andrew McPeak in studio for a live interview with me, Gina Watts.
I couldn't imagine being anywhere else, Gina.
Hey, I'm so excited. I am so excited. And we are going to talk about rediscovering your why, igniting your passion for purpose-driven leadership. I'm so excited for this conversation, and it's so important to focus not only on what we do, but why we do it.
Yeah.
Our episodes this season center around themes of emotional resilience and well-being. And so I don't want to wait any longer. I mean, I could keep going on and on giving you introductions.
I need no more introductions.
Okay. All right. Well,
We're
if you're
good.
okay with it,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. So we know that this idea of rediscovering your why is something you deeply care about.
Yeah.
You actually talk about it. You dedicate a whole chapter to it. Chapter 9 in your book, Ready for Real Life, Leading When You Feel Like Leaving.
Yeah.
Which I love that one. I love the title in itself. But can you share about a moment in your own leadership journey when you realized that you had drifted from your why?
Yeah.
And maybe how you found your way back?
Yeah. Yeah. That emotion of, because every time I say leading when you feel like leaving, everybody goes, oh, because we've all been there, you know, that's why this conversation is so important. And perhaps some of our listeners as we start this season are there. So I hope this is a helpful season for that. But yeah, so, okay, going back, it was actually fairly early in my career. My background is actually in curriculum design, and I love learning about learning. So how do people actually learn and all of that? So with our organization, for actually 10 years now, I have helped with our learning design, figuring out how do we communicate in a way that both the teacher in the classroom, the student who's experiencing this are going to really love what we do. So several years into my career here, I made what I call lovingly and affectionately, I call it my $7,000 mistake, because it just paints a vivid picture of what happened. So several years ago, we had these videos that were a part of our curriculum. And it's hard to imagine this today, but these videos were of our founder, Tim Elmore, teaching. And he would teach the concept. And this is a video we showed to children. He would teach the concept for about 15 minutes. And it was him with a screen, and he was talking. And what we started to realize, because when I came to the organization, these videos were already 3 or 4 years old. So within a couple of years, it doesn't take long for a video to feel dated. And so we started to notice, these videos kind of started to feel kind of old. And so we were trying to figure out how can we refresh the videos without having to redo them, right? Because we didn't want to take on that cost. And so Andrew, sitting alone in his office, was like, I've got an idea. So what I did was I grabbed a great member of our team. She was a brilliant communicator. And I was like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to film new intros to these videos. So we've got a fresher face who's connecting the dots and all this stuff. And so we paid $7,000 to a studio. We took a whole day and filmed brand new intros and outros to all of our videos. We attached those on either end of this 15-minute video, making it 17 minutes. And I will never forget being so proud of what we had created. And I got to do a site visit at a school that was using our program. And I walked in and I was like, we just came out with new videos. We're going to put these into the program. I'm so excited. Can I show you one? They're like, great. So I hit play, new intro plays. Then it goes into Tim's part. And I pause it and I turn around and I say, what do you guys think? And they're staring at me and they're like, how long is this video? And I was like, they're on average about 17 minutes. And she was like, that's not going to work for us. I was like, oh. She's like, yeah, we already only have 25 minutes for this lesson. The videos are already stretching a lot of that time. We can't make them longer. And it was like this light bulb went off. Of like, I made a change to our curriculum without thinking about or talking to our end user, right? I didn't ask what it was going to be like in that classroom. And I realized, there's a saying in the deaf community that I heard about several years ago that I think applies to this idea. They say nothing without us. Don't design something for deaf people without deaf people involved, right? And I had made that same mistake of I designed something for teachers without talking to a teacher. And I think that's what often happens when we forget why we're doing what we're doing, is we get in our heads about I'm making this thing, or I'm going to create this thing. And it becomes about, frankly, my $7,000 mistake was about how smart I was, right? It was about this brilliant idea that I had, or the way I was going to solve the problem, when the problem was I didn't really actually understand the problem to begin with. And I didn't take the time to understand the problem. I took my version of events and applied that universally. And I think a lot of times that's what happens when we make this mistake.
That's such a great and vulnerable example. I'm so glad you shared it because your intentions were good.
Yeah.
They were great.
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, and even though in your reflection you felt like it was about you, the reality is that how many times do we all like have well-intended things that we do that might end up to be a $7,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 mistake because we're just so focused on that end goal. You know, you often talk about the power, purpose in cultivating resilience.
Yeah.
How does a clear sense of purpose serve as a buffer against maybe burnout or discouragement for educators? Maybe if we talk even about discouragement first, because I could see you getting discouraged from the story you just shared with us. Like, well, that didn't work. So what am I doing here? Right? So what could you share with our listeners about resilience?
Well, the connection between purpose and resilience is really interesting because I think a lot of times people think of purpose as a luxury, right? Oh, it'd be nice to have a job that I really feel like is connected to my purpose, but that's for somebody else. And I think that's not true. I think all of us have to have a sense of purpose in what we do because purpose grounds us and gives us fuel and energy to keep going. Years ago, I was reading a book by David Brooks, and he talked about it this way. He said, I think that people can only understand themselves by orienting themselves around forces that transcend themselves. People can only understand themselves by orienting themselves around a force that transcends them, right? Whether that's a purpose or a mission or a people group who you're trying to serve or a problem you're trying to solve or a faith that you deeply believe in. All of those things are it's like going on a journey and having the sun as a guidance point, right? Or a mountain as a guidance point. And by keeping it framed in just the right way, you can, keep going. So how I think about this is the reason purpose is so important in our daily life, not just I chose my profession, I've got purpose, now I'm going to go just work a 9-to-5 job, right? But keep coming back to that purpose. The reason it's so important is I think of it like we're almost, especially educators in schools, are sort of like a ship out in the ocean, right? Yeah. Waves are constantly moving things up and down, right? Every administrator I've ever met is like, today's a good day, we'll see what tomorrow brings, right? What they're referencing is there's all kinds of things that are coming at me all the time that are out of my control. So the waves are moving me up and down. The wind is blowing. Occasionally storms come through. All things outside of my control, right? And if you're one of those people who lives in the moment and forgets, why am I doing what I'm doing? You are going to be tossed about by those things like crazy, right? Yeah. It's sort of like a sea of your own emotions, right? If you're just constantly reacting and never being proactive, you're just going to keep being tossed around. I think of purpose like an anchor, right? A ship in those waters dropping an anchor point still is going to feel those things, right? Because as a school leader, you can't ever stop those things from coming. But the difference is they're not going to throw you about because you've got that anchor point that's holding you. And if you keep coming back to that purpose, keep reminding yourself of why you started what you started, it serves as an anchor to keep you grounded.
Man, I hope you guys have your notebooks and you're taking notes. I just did. Andrew can attest to it. Andrew said, purpose is not a luxury. Purpose is an anchor. Purpose grounds us and gives us the fuel to keep going. That is so good, friend. It is. It is. I literally, in my mind, maybe it's because we work with visuals,
a lot of
images
them,
and stuff, but I'm just thinking of like an anchor and purpose written on it as a reminder for folks. So for those of you creatives out there who are drawing while you take your notes, that would be a good one to have to remind yourself when you get discouraged. In the book that you wrote, Ready for Real Life, you outline essential soft skills for students, but we know educators need these too, right? So how do you propose that purpose and passion show up practically in the life of a healthy, resilient adult? So we talk about students all the time, but we need our educators to have those skills too.
Yeah. So we're connecting purpose and passion here. I think those two belong together. And here's why. Once you find a purpose, you then become passionate about that purpose, right? But how do we actually define passion? The root of the word, I love telling teenagers this especially because everybody asks them, what are you passionate about? The root of the word passion actually means to suffer, right? It's why at Easter, they say Christ did on the cross is called the passion is because it's a suffering, right? So when you ask a student, and I tell kids this, when somebody asks you, what are you passionate about? You know what they're actually asking you? What do you care about so much you're willing to make sacrifices to see it happen? You're willing to suffer, to give of your time, of your talent, of all those things in order to see that come to fruition. Once we determine a purpose that's big enough, that's deserving enough of our sacrifices, that's when passion comes into play, right? So the reason I bring that up is because often when we hear about passion, we think feels good, right? But passion doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it's great, right? But the idea behind passion is that our purpose should lead us to a series of daily activity that is in pursuit of that purpose, right? The passion should show up every single day. How do we live this out? I've already mentioned David Brooks. He's written so much good stuff on this topic, but this is actually another of his books. He says this is a great quote. He said, the most complete definition of a commitment is this. He says, falling in love with something and then building a structure of behavior around it for those moments when love falters. Falling in love with something and then building a structure of behavior around it to support those moments when your love falters. It's a recognition of our human inability to stay consistent. We actually, as human beings, just really suck at that, right? So if you truly want to build a passion around a purpose that you're working towards, it is establishing a set of behaviors that happen every day, every week that support that. So for me, we talked at the beginning about how do you come back to your why. I build a habit, a behavior around envisioning the student I'm working towards, right? Whenever we are thinking about coming out with a new product or purpose after or new product or curriculum, after my $7,000 mistake, guess what I do? We pilot every idea that we have with real educators in real classrooms to make sure that we're getting this right. So it's little practical things that become the embodiment of my passion and purpose. In the book, I have 5 skills, and I think every student needs these 5 skills, but I think educators need them too, as you referenced. And they are really simply the mirror, which is our self-awareness. So how well do we understand ourselves? The map, which is our self-management. So how well do we direct ourselves toward the outcome we're trying to get to? A compass, which is our responsible decision-making. So what values or drivers help us make choices? The 4th one is the two-way radio, which is about how well we communicate and connect with other people, right? Just like when we're talking on a two-way radio. And then the final one is the passport, and that's our our social awareness. So it's understanding ourselves and also how we relate to other people. So I won't go deep into those, but suffice it to say, I think if we're going to truly say that we get this, that we're living for a clear purpose, that we're living out that passion every single day, we also need to build the tools and daily habits that support that.
I love the way that you frame that. As you were talking, I was thinking how the definition of passion and suffering, making sacrifices, and then you said about it's like you have a purpose that's big enough that requires you to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I felt like you were also defining resilience for people. I feel like resilience is one of these buzzwords that we all use, but not always do we have clarity about how we can live that out.
Yeah.
And then you gave us these 5 things, these 5 behaviors that can help us with our remember and recall our purpose, but to also passionately pursue it. And that was just, friends, I literally need you to turn in your homework because if you didn't write that down and if you aren't tracking with us, I'm just telling you, you missed a whole lot of nuggets that you probably want to hit share so that somebody else can learn from this as well. We talk to educators and we talk to leaders in education, but also I hope you know that this is a space for anyone and everyone to learn and grow with us.
Well said.
So, Andrew, for someone who thinks they or knows that they need a reset, they feel stuck or tired or maybe unsure, what's maybe one simple step that they can take even this week to begin reconnecting with their purpose?
Yeah. Okay, this is really good. I believe in the power of practical, right? In fact, at Growing Leaders, we often say we want to be pracademic, right? So make sure our academic box is checked for sure, that we know what we're talking about and we have research to back us up. But we also want to be practical. So I'm all about it. Here's what I recommend, a great way to kind of stay connected, simple practice. I believe in what I will call, it could be a journaling activity if you're a big journaler. If you're not a big journaler, you're like, Andrew, don't give me something to journal. I don't have time to journal. Here's what I would say. Make it a walking activity. So maybe you don't write it down, but you go on a distraction-free walk with the intent of focusing on this. But here's the question. Ask yourself, if I had to explain what my purpose is at my job in one sentence, what would I say? If I had to explain to somebody what my purpose is at my job, by the way, don't tell me your job description. I don't care about that. I want to know what your purpose is. What is your purpose? I would say the best answers to this question do their best to word it in a way that the answer is never going to change. So this is fundamentally tied to your identity, not your job, right? But this means that you should probably make it a little more generic than specific. And then once you figure out what that is, and by the way, it should be 5 to 10 words tops. This is not a long sentence. But for me, I think about this kind of topic all the time. And even just a couple of months ago, I wrote down something, and I don't know if it'll be framed this way for forever, but for me, I wrote down, my purpose is to bring ideas to life. I just love that language. And when I write that, as soon as I said that out loud, to bring ideas to life, something inside of me resonated. Do you ever say something out loud and then you get goosebumps about what you just said?
I mean, I just got goosebumps, but I didn't say that. That was great, though.
But that's what happened to me when I said that. And that's what I mean by if you find something that resonates with you like that, like that sentence did for me, to bring ideas to life. Like, I love nothing more than for somebody to say, what if we, and for me to go, I know how to do it. Let's do it. Let's bring that to life. So I'd say those are the things that come to mind. If there was one activity that I could give somebody to help them reconnect with their purpose, with their why, I would say get out your journal or go on a walk. Maybe if you have no other time, you can do this on your drive. After this episode is over, I would say go on, get that experience, remove distraction, and ask yourself that question. If I had to explain what my purpose is in one sentence, what would I say?
That was powerful, because I think sometimes when we think about what our purpose is, we often, if not always, tie it to our work.
Yeah. And
not necessarily our identity and how we show up in it. That was very well done. Thanks, friend.
Thank you, Gina. This was fun.
Yeah.
I hope it was helpful.
It was helpful, but I do want to ask you one more question. Okay. So you gave us practical tips and tools. You gave us clarity, defining passion and purpose, and really help pointing us back to our why. There might be some folks that maybe need permission to feel what they're feeling. Maybe they're just running on empty. Maybe they're just pushing through, and maybe they kind of need to read that chapter on leading when you feel like leaving. What is one thing that you would want to give every leader listening who feels disconnected from the work that they once loved?
Yeah. Man, there's a couple of things. I take those things really seriously because I know I've talked with those educators who are just like, I don't know if I've got it in me anymore. And when you get to that place, it is painful to be there. So I take it incredibly seriously. But I would say, I don't want this to be a rote answer, but it is just fundamentally true. When you're on an airplane, there are two rules. one of which is repeated every time during the safety check. The next one is everybody knows is true, but they don't acknowledge, right? The first one is, if those masks drop down, right, what are you supposed to do, Gina?
Put it on yourself first.
Put it on yourself first before you help anyone else. That is the most practical advice in the world when you think about it, right? Because if you got a child next to you and you're helping them with their mask, you've almost got it on and then you pass out from lack of oxygen. And guess what? Neither of you has a mask on at that point. Whereas if I take care of myself first, then I am more equipped to handle and serve other people. I'd say that's number one. Is what are the daily practices that you have in your life that are supporting your connection to your mission? What I realized years ago is I cannot expect to show up with excellence in my job if I have not made time and space for me to refresh, renew, reconnect with my purpose. And so probably about 2.5 years ago, I started setting my alarm a little earlier. And I get up in the morning and I'm reading, I'm journaling, I've got my coffee that I spend too much money on because I'm trying to create this pocket of time in the morning that refreshes me. I mean, I have to get up earlier, so it's not refreshing me in a literal sense. It's refreshing me in a spiritual sense, right? Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about is like you've got to put that oxygen mask on at some point. So that's number one. But here's the other thing about airplanes. If you go through turbulence on an airplane, the flight starts to go up and down. The first thing your eyes will do, pay attention the next time you're on a plane, you go through a little bit of turbulence, first thing your eyes do is they go to that flight attendant, the same one who told you to put your oxygen mask on first. And the reason you're looking at that flight attendant is that person is there for more reasons than to just serve you drinks. That's the person who knows whether or not this is bad turbulence or this is just a little hiccup, right? And so when you look to them, if they're peaceful, they're smiling and still serving drinks, you go, oh, okay, we must be fine. Yeah. Right? If they start panicking and they run down the aisle, you're going to buckle up a little tighter, right? And here's what I would say. You are the flight attendant for the people in your building. Yay. So if you don't put on that oxygen mask first, and then you go through a tumultuous time, and people are looking at you and you haven't made space and time to care for yourself, guess what? They're not going to either. Yeah. And when they see you freak out because you're not grounded, they're going to start freaking out too. So we've got to recognize if we don't take time to care for ourselves, it's going to pass. In fact, there's scientists who call this a social contagion. That's literally the term for it. When you are going through anxiety, all those things, because you haven't taken the time to do that, it passes to other people. And we've got to be conscientious of that as leaders. Man. Whew. I get to call you friend. Sometimes I just am, no, it's actually more than sometimes, but I'm thoroughly impressed and grateful just to learn from you. Thank you for making time to share your wisdom with all of us. Thank you, Gina. That's very kind. Yeah. Now, normally, this is the part of the episode where we do our DMI, the Don't Miss It But they've already heard me talk too much. Well, I mean, you're not going to have a takeaway unless it's like, I got to spend time with Gina. So, which is always my DMI secretly. Thank you, dear. So, but since Andrew's been in the hot seat today, I'll let him take a break and I'll share mine. So for me, my DMI, I think it's this last segment that we talked about, having permission, because you didn't to feel what you're feeling. Like you didn't say that you don't have permission to feel burnt out or worn out or disconnected. You said you named it that's okay. Yeah. But what do you do in response to it? And I think the metaphor of, putting your oxygen mask on first and also being the flight attendant. Yeah. There's a reason why the flight attendant gives instructions and is clear with what's expected so that in times of danger or turbulence or unexpected conditions, you know what to do to be safe and cared for. And that was great. That was all the snaps
and things.
Thank you.
It was good.
That was great. Thank you for sharing.
So thank you, Andrew, for sharing your heart behind the work and for reminding us that emotional resilience often begins by remembering what matters most, and that's our why. Friends, thank you for joining us today on this episode of the School on a Mission podcast. But before you hit skip onto your next podcast, we've got a little challenge for you. So make sure you go grab a pen or a notebook or a sticky note or maybe even the back of your hand and write down one action that you're going to take this week. Andrew dropped a lot of gold. I'm sure there's something that you can pick up. Maybe it's something that you're going to do, something you're going to investigate, maybe something you're going to read more about, or a person that you want to meet with. Do you have it? Perfect. Now, DM us with your action step. We want to know what you're doing, and we can't wait to see what awesome things you're up to. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep leading your school on a mission.
Thanks for listening to this episode of School on a Mission, a podcast for educators by educators, produced by Growing Leaders and powered by the Maxwell Leadership Foundation. To learn more about Growing Leaders, visit growingleaders.com. For more about the School on a Mission podcast, head to schoolonamissionpodcast.com.
Perfect.